Yes. Lily woke up. Yes. Noah smiled again. But when Harper walked out of Clearwater General and vanished into the morning mist, the real question began. Who sent him, and would he return when the next child needed him most? Before we begin this unforgettable story, would you mind sharing where you're from in the comments? And if stories of love, loyalty, and second chances move you, please give this video a like and consider subscribing. Clearwater, Oregon. A stormy night cloaked in mystery. The rain fell in steady sheets over the quiet town of Clearwater, Oregon, the kind of late spring downpour that painted the streets in slick silver and cast halos around every street lamp. Wind hissed between the buildings carrying the scent of wet pine and ozone, while the towering silhouette of Clearwater General Hospital stood solemnly against the storm-lit sky, its glass windows glowing faintly like watchful eyes in the dark. Inside the hospital, the night shift passed in subdued rhythm. Nurses moved through the dim corridors like whispered thoughts, the echo of rubber soles on polished floors drowned beneath the hum of machines and the distant rumbles of thunder. It was in this hush of routine that something strange, almost imperceptible, occurred. The hospital's automatic doors slid open with a soft hiss, though no one approached the entrance. Through them padded a golden retriever. Harper was no ordinary stray. 7 years old, with a thick coat of golden fur, dulled slightly by the rain, he carried himself with a grace that belied his soaked and slightly matted appearance. His eyes were warm, amber, flecked with darker gold, and they glimmered with a peculiar intensity, focused knowing. Despite his damp fur and faint limp in his left hind leg, Harper walked with purpose as if drawn by an invisible thread. He was of average size for his breed, but broad-chested and strong, the kind of dog who had once known both companionship and discipline. No collar, no leash, no hesitation. Harper moved like he belonged. The security guard at the front desk, Rick Malone, was half dozing behind the monitors, a man in his 50s with thinning hair and an eternal scowl carved into his face from years of graveyard shifts. He didn't see Harper pass, and even if he had, he might have waved him off as someone's therapy dog. Harper made no sound. His nails clicked softly on the linoleum as he turned left then right, navigating the halls of the hospital like he had walked them 100 times before. Upstairs, in the neonatal intensive care unit, the air was colder, more sterile, humming with the life support of those who could not fight for themselves. The lights were dimmed for the night save for a soft overhead beam illuminating the rows of incubators and bassinets. And there, in the third chamber on the left behind a sheet of glass, lay a child. Her name was Lily Monroe, just 10 months old. Her face was pale framed by wisps of fine blonde hair. Her body was still beneath the tangled web of wires and tubes that connected her to machines, keeping her alive. Only days ago, Lily had been in a devastating car accident. Her parents had not survived. She had. Barely. She had not woken since. Her vitals were erratic, her survival uncertain. Outside the ICU, Sarah Linwood, the night nurse, sat at the observation station, flipping through Lily's chart. Sarah was in her late 30s, lean and sharp-featured with prematurely gray streaks in her tied-back brown hair. Her uniform was immaculate, her movements efficient but gentle. She carried an air of quiet weariness, the kind that came from having held too many hands, that had grown cold from years of telling families the news they feared most. Sarah had once lost a child of her own. A boy, leukemia. He had been 4. Since then, she had never left the ICU floor. "If I couldn't save my own," she once said, "I'll fight for every other one." She was the first to hear the soft click-click of Harper's nails on the floor. She stood frowning, thinking it might be one of the therapy dogs gone rogue. But when she stepped into the corridor and saw the drenched retriever sitting calmly outside Lily's glass enclosure, her breath caught. He looked up at her, not pleading, just waiting. "Where did you come from?" she whispered, but the question felt rhetorical, like speaking to a ghost. She should have called security, should have reported it, but she didn't. Instead, she watched as Harper, with a gentle push of his nose, nudged open the slightly ajar ICU door and walked in. Sarah didn't move. Harper approached Lily's crib, weaving between the machines, then lowered himself slowly, as if mindful of every beep and breath in the room. He curled up on the sterile floor beside the crib, resting his head just beneath Lily's tiny outstretched hand. Sarah blinked. For a moment, she thought she imagined it the way the heart monitors steadied the slight, almost imperceptible rise in the oxygen saturation levels. The change was minuscule, but it was real. She walked back to the observation station, sat down, and said nothing. The storm outside deepened, but inside the ICU a hush fell. Harper didn't move. Lily didn't wake, but something in the air shifted, a presence, a bond, not born of science, but something else, something that didn't need words. Rachel Dawson moved through the corridors of Clearwater General Hospital with the steady grace of someone who had lived 1,000 nights beneath fluorescent lights. She was in her early 40s, tall and lean, with soft shoulders and a weathered face that rarely smiled but never frowned. Her dark, auburn hair was tied in a loose twist, a few strands always managing to escape and frame her tired, gray-blue eyes. Rachel wasn't just the head nurse, she was the anchor of the ICU. Colleagues respected her, not for kindness or charm, but for consistency. She had no time for small talk, but she remembered every child's name, every medication chart, every subtle change in breathing. Grief had molded her long ago. She had been married once briefly. Her husband, a paramedic, had died in a highway accident while rushing to save someone else. Since then, she had made the hospital her world, clocking in early, leaving late, spending holidays in sterile halls lit by machines and quiet prayers. When Sarah Linwood first told her about the dog, Rachel was skeptical. She assumed it was an exaggeration or a mistake. Therapy animals came through sometimes, but none without paperwork. None soaking wet, none unaccompanied. But when she stood at the ICU window and saw Harper curled beside Lily Monroe's crib, something inside her hesitated. She didn't react immediately. Instead, she watched. For 5 minutes. 10. Long enough to see the girl's vitals level off. The oxygen rate that had danced nervously all week was now holding still. The irregular thud of her heart had softened into something steadier, quieter, like the tide retreating. Rachel didn't believe in miracles, but she believed in patterns. And this wasn't normal. That night, she didn't report Harper. She simply noted Lily's improvements in her chart and moved on. Downstairs in the pediatric oncology unit, Eliza Reed sat in the dark beside her son's bed. She hadn't slept properly in 3 weeks. She was 34, but looked older. Deep lines cut across her forehead, and her blonde hair, once thick and glossy, was now tied back in a brittle ponytail, strands falling loose as if exhausted from holding on. Eliza had been a high school English teacher before Noah was diagnosed. Books had once been her world, fiction, essays, poetry. She had taught children how to find truth in metaphor. Now she barely remembered her own voice. Noah was 7. Thin small for his age, with olive-toned skin and deep brown eyes far too wise for a child. The chemotherapy had taken most of his hair, but not his smile, though lately even that had started to fade. His leukemia had relapsed for the 2nd time, and this time the doctors weren't using words like remission. They were saying things like comfort measures and quality of life. Eliza had stopped listening. That night, as thunder rumbled and the hospital trembled faintly under the weight of storm and sorrow, Harper wandered again. No one saw him leave the ICU. He padded down a service stairwell and made his way to the lower floor through the quiet, darker corridors of the cancer ward. He paused outside room 217. Inside, Noah stirred. Harper stood still, his fur still damp in places, the rain now just a whisper on the windows. He gazed through the glass head, tilted slightly, ears perked. Eliza looked up from her seat, her eyes locking on the dogs. At first, she thought she was hallucinating. She blinked, but Harper didn't vanish. He simply stood there watching. Eliza rose and stepped closer to the door. She opened it halfway cautious. "Where did you come from?" she whispered. Harper didn't move. Then slowly, he took a step forward, stopped just at the threshold and lay down his gaze, never leaving Noah. Eliza glanced down the hallway. It was empty, silent, not even a cleaning cart in sight. She should have called a nurse, should have said something. Instead, she sat on the floor beside him. For the first time in days, Noah slept peacefully. Eliza felt warmth beside her real, steady alive. The fur beneath her fingers was coarse but clean, the body beneath strong and calm. Something about the dog's presence uncoiled the tightness in her chest. She cried quietly for the first time in weeks. The next morning, Rachel passed by the oncology ward while doing rounds. She noticed Eliza asleep in the hallway, her head resting against the wall. Harper was gone. Rachel didn't wake her. She simply kept walking, her mind beginning to form the shape of something impossible. That afternoon, she pulled the security tapes. She watched Harper's journey frame by frame. No one opened the doors. No one guided him. But he knew where to go. She didn't speak to administration, not yet. She needed more time, more signs, and deep down she feared what rules might crush what had only just begun to bloom. That night, Rachel stayed past her shift. She sat beside Lily. Harper returned. This time, she reached out a hand and touched his head. He looked up at her with eyes that didn't just see but understood. And Rachel, for the first time in over a decade, whispered something she hadn't said since the accident. "Thank you." By the third week of Harper's silent vigil, Clearwater General Hospital had become a place of quiet speculation and hushed disbelief. Rumors like stray wind in a long corridor passed from nurse to nurse, folded between shift handovers and whispered in the break room over vending machine coffee. Nobody had an explanation, but nearly everyone had noticed. The dog, the girl, the change. Each morning, Lily Monroe's vitals improved. It wasn't dramatic, just a little stronger heartbeat, slightly better, oxygen levels, the occasional flutter of movement in her fingers or eyelids. But after weeks of static despair, these small changes were monumental. They were the kind of signs that made you lean in closer, hold your breath, and dare to hope. Rachel Dawson had not officially cleared Harper's presence. On paper, he did not exist, but off the record he had become part of the routine. She began assigning an empty patient wristband to H. Monroe as a silent joke, one only she and Sarah Linwood understood. Sarah, who had become a quiet guardian of the dog's place in the ICU, made sure he was fed-bathed and not disturbed during his nightly watch. Rachel was careful. She didn't speak openly. She kept charts, ran every test, and cross-checked every reading twice, trying to convince herself it wasn't coincidence. But even her skepticism, forged over years of heartbreak, had begun to erode. There was something about Harper. Not just the timing, the way he moved, how he never barked, how his gaze lingered, not with confusion, but with calm certainty. Eliza Reed came every evening now. Not just for Noah, but for Harper. She brought a small cloth bag of snacks, baked chicken and foil apple slices, or bits of plain bread. She wasn't sure if dogs should eat apples, but Harper seemed to know what to take and what to leave. She'd sit cross-legged on the floor outside Lily's ICU chamber, while Harper lay beside the crib watching Lily breathe. Eliza didn't talk to many people anymore, but she talked to Harper about Noah, about fear, about how it felt to love something so small and still be powerless to save it. "I know you understand," she whispered one night, tears running down her face, but not bothering to wipe them. "You wouldn't be here if you didn't." That same night, Eliza found Rachel at the nurse's station reviewing labs under the soft hum of a flickering overhead light. Rachel looked up, weary but attentive. "I want to try something," Eliza said. Rachel raised an eyebrow. "I want to bring Harper into Noah's room. Just for a while. Just to see." Rachel hesitated, fingers tightening around the pen in her hand. "You know the risks. Oncology's stricter. Immune-compromised infection protocols. I'll sign whatever you need. I'll stay. I'll bathe him myself if I have to. But please." Last week was the first night Noah didn't wake up screaming. He hasn't smiled in months until Harper stopped outside our door. Rachel studied her for a long moment. Eliza's eyes weren't pleading. They were focused, fierce, the kind of look only a mother on the brink of despair could carry. "I'll cover your shift myself if anyone asks," Rachel said quietly. "Just keep the door closed." That night, Harper followed Eliza down the corridor without leash or command. He padded softly into room 217, sat beside Noah's hospital bed, and curled himself into a crescent shape at the base of it. Noah stirred, once opened his eyes and smiled. Then he slept through the night, without morphine, without trembling, without crying out for his mother. Eliza sat beside the bed, hand resting lightly on Harper's back, and wept silently, not from fear this time, but from something else, something tender, something sacred. By morning, Rachel had charted the best labs Noah had shown in weeks. By afternoon, the whispers had become murmurs, and the murmurs were now quiet declarations. There was a dog in the hospital, and he was changing everything. Upstairs, Harper resumed his vigil at Lily's crib as if nothing had changed. Sarah noticed a new detail. Lily's fingers twitched toward Harper when he approached, like she knew he was there, like her body remembered him before her mind could wake. In the staff lounge, Dr. Natalie Miles, a pediatric resident with dark curls and a too-loud laugh, leaned against the coffee counter and said to a colleague, "If someone told me a dog could reduce pain response and stabilize vitals, I'd say they were insane. But this one, I'm starting to believe." Natalie was known for her blunt humor and cutting sarcasm, but she had a soft spot for kids, especially the ones who never left the ward. She'd lost a younger sister to spinal cancer when she was 15. That loss had shaped her, sharpening her into someone who refused to be caught off guard again. She had seen Harper pass by her rounds twice now, never barking, never wandering, always headed somewhere very specific. "He's not just a dog," she muttered one night while typing notes. "He's a prescription they haven't invented yet." It had been 21 days since Harper first stepped through the doors of Clearwater General. In those 3 weeks, a quiet miracle had unfolded in the hospital's sterile corridors, but miracles rarely go unquestioned. As the stories about a golden dog in the ICU began to ripple past break-room gossip and into formal conversations, doubt crept in. Dr. Thomas Blake, the hospital's chief medical officer, was a man molded by war zones and data. With his upright posture, tailored white coat, and steel-gray eyes, he carried the air of someone who had learned early that emotion was a liability in the face of triage. He'd once told a grieving father, "Hope is not a treatment plan," and he'd meant it. When word reached his desk about an unregistered dog being allowed to roam the ICU, Blake didn't send an email or call a meeting. He walked straight into the chaos. Rachel Dawson was at the nurse's station when he arrived. Her spine straightened the moment she heard his footsteps. She had seen this confrontation coming. "There's a dog in the ICU," Blake asked flatly. Rachel met his gaze. "Yes, sir." His jaw tensed. "You're allowing it." He hasn't caused a single issue, and 2 patients have shown consistent improvement after weeks of decline. That's anecdotal, not clinical. It's observable, Rachel said evenly, and replicable. He stays by their side, their vitals improve. Blake's face didn't change, but his voice cooled further. This isn't a hospice chapel, Nurse Dawson. This is a hospital governed by medical science, not superstition. And that was the end of the discussion. That afternoon, 2 staff members from facilities were sent to remove Harper from the building. Harper was lying by Lily Monroe's crib when they came, still watchful, calm as ever. Sarah Linwood tried to stall them, citing procedural concerns. He's not a threat, and you should see the monitors Lily's holding steady. We're just following orders, one of the men said with a shrug. Rachel arrived too late to intervene. She watched Harper stand without resistance, glance once more at Lily, then follow them out. He never barked, never pulled away. By evening, the effects were undeniable. Lily's oxygen saturation dipped. Her heartbeat, once steady, fell into irregular patterns. In room 217, Noah woke in the middle of a nightmare, drenched in sweat, and clutching his side, whispering about the golden dog being gone. Eliza could barely calm him down. The morphine had no effect. By midnight, Eliza was in Dr. Blake's office. She didn't knock softly, she entered with urgency. "I want to adopt him," she said. "Harper, the dog. I want legal custody so I can bring him back here." Blake looked up from his paperwork, brow raised. "This is not a kennel, Miss Reed. This isn't about kennels," she snapped. "My son slept every night Harper was nearby. Tonight he screamed for hours. That's not evidence. It's real." Blake stood slowly, folding his arms. "You're a grieving parent. You're attaching meaning to coincidence." "I'm a mother," she said, stepping forward, eyes blazing. "And I know what my child looks like when he's in pain and when he's not. Harper helped. You can't explain it. Fine, but you can't ignore it either." There was a long silence. Blake said nothing. Neither agreement nor refusal. Just silence. Eliza left the office with her hands shaking, unsure whether she had changed anything at all. But she wasn't done fighting. The sunrise over Clearwater was soft and golden, filtering through the hospital's tall windows like a quiet benediction. After so many nights of storm and shadow mourning, finally felt like a promise. On the ICU floor, the light settled gently over the quiet corridors, and for the first time in weeks, there was no tension in the air, only stillness. Harper lay beside Lily Monroe's crib, his head resting lightly against the edge of the bed. His golden fur shimmered in the sunlight like something not quite of this world. He hadn't moved for hours, only occasionally shifting his eyes to watch the child breathe. Then, just past dawn, Lily stirred. It wasn't dramatic. There was no gasp or sudden cry. But her eyelids fluttered, then opened small, wide, unfocused eyes, gazing up at the ceiling as though trying to remember the shape of light. Her fingers twitched, her lips parted, and the monitor's soft beeps grew steadier. Sarah Linwood, who had been watching through the glass, dropped her clipboard. She ran to Rachel's station, her voice trembling. "She's awake." Rachel rushed to Lily's side, disbelief catching in her throat. She leaned in and gently brushed Lily's hair back. The little girl blinked slowly, then turned her head just slightly toward Harper. Downstairs in room 217, Eliza had just placed a spoonful of oatmeal on the tray beside Noah's bed. Her son had been unusually still all morning, eyes closed, hands resting by his sides. Then suddenly he sat up. Not with assistance, not guided. Just sat up. "I want to try," Noah whispered. Eliza froze, watching as her son reached for the spoon with thin fingers. Slowly, carefully, he lifted it to his lips and took a bite. The oatmeal was bland and overcooked, but he swallowed it like it was the best thing he'd ever tasted. Harper entered the room moments later. He didn't make a sound, just walked in and sat near the bed watching Noah with those calm, amber eyes. Noah looked at him and smiled. "I had a dream," he said, voice thin. He was there. Rachel was the first to inform Dr. Blake. The chief medical officer stood at the back of the ICU reading Lily's vitals. The monitors didn't lie. Her oxygen levels had normalized. Her heart rate was strong. Her reflexes were returning. "She woke up," Rachel said simply. Blake didn't answer. He stared at the screen, then looked at the crib, then at Harper, and said nothing. He didn't need to. Over the next few days, Harper continued his quiet patrol. He stayed close, but he no longer curled up at Lily's or Noah's side. Instead, he walked the halls calmly, resting in doorways, lying quietly near the nurse station or under the chairs in the waiting room. He didn't need to be asked to stay. He knew his time was nearing its end. Rachel noticed the shift in him. There was no sadness, no resistance, only peace, like a soldier who knew the battle had been won. On the fourth morning, Harper was gone. He left without fanfare, walking through the hospital's main doors just after sunrise. The security guard on duty, Walter Kincaid, gave a small nod as the golden dog passed. "Go on, then," he muttered. "You did good." Rachel and Eliza arrived too late to see him go. They stood together at the entrance, watching the empty sidewalk. Eliza clutched a folded blanket Harper had once lain on. Rachel wiped her eyes. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. 1 year later, on a clear spring morning, a new wing was opened at Clearwater General. The walls were painted soft blue and filled with light. Murals of trees, animals, and stars stretched from floor to ceiling. There were therapy rooms with music, quiet spaces with sunlight and beds, not just for healing, but for resting hearts. Harper's wing, the plaque read. Below it, a bronze sculpture of a golden retriever curled in sleep rested beneath the carved words, "For those who heal without words." Eliza and Rachel stood together at the dedication. Noah, now stronger and smiling, handed a pair of scissors to his mother to cut the ribbon. In the crowd, Sarah, Natalie, Michael, and even Dr. Blake stood among the nurses and children watching quietly. None of them had ever found Harper again, but none of them had forgotten. Some believed he was just a dog. Others knew better. Sometimes the most profound miracles arrive, not with thunder or spectacle, but on quiet pause and in silent moments of grace. Harper didn't speak, didn't ask for recognition. He simply showed up where he was needed, stayed by the side of the broken, and left once the healing had begun. In a world ruled by numbers and logic, his presence reminded everyone that some things are guided by a higher hand. Perhaps it was chance, or perhaps it was something more, a divine whisper sent through a creature without words. In our daily lives, we're often too busy to notice the gentle signs around us, moments of compassion, unexpected comfort, or the quiet strength that carries us when we feel most alone. This story is a call to remember God can work through the unexpected, even through a dog named Harper. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect. Maybe you've experienced something unexplainable, something that felt like grace. If so, share it in the comments below. Let this space be a place for hope. Type Amen if you believe in miracles. Share this story with someone who needs encouragement today. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, because someone out there might need this message more than you know. May God bless you and your loved ones.